All right. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Cannabis Advisory Committee Cultivation Subcommittee meeting on September 5th, 2023. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And moderator, if we could please get a roll call of members.
Of course, but before we begin, I would like to make a note about today's meeting format. The Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act exemptions expired in July of this year, so our Cannabis Advisory Committee meetings and subcommittee meetings will now be conducted in a hybrid format. This means that we will welcome attendees both in person here at DCC headquarters in Rancho Cordova or virtually over WebEx. These are our first hybrid meetings, and the DCC team has worked really hard to ensure a seamless transition into this new format. The most important part of these meetings is the public input, and that's why we're here. So if you run into any technical glitches, please know we'll work them out and you will be heard, so keep raising your hand. We appreciate your understanding as we work through this new system, and now I will call the roll, so please answer present when your name is called. Chair Nevedal?
Present.
And Member Brown?
Present.
Member Clifford? Is not here, but a quorum is established.
Great. Thank you so much. Moving on to agenda item number 2. Agenda item 2 is going to be public comments for items not on today's agenda. And so members, we've talked a lot about items previously that are not on the agenda. But I think what we'll do is we'll go to public comment to see if the public has input for future agenda items.
Okay, we are now taking public comment on this agenda item. The topic for this public comment period is displayed on the slide, so please keep comments limited to this agenda item. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand by clicking the hand icon next to your name if you've logged into the meeting, or pressing *3 if you've called in. For our in-person commentators, please raise your hand and our audience moderator will work with you. All commenters will have 2 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning, and each member of the public will have 1 opportunity to speak on each agenda item. So without further ado, Mitchell Colbert, I've sent you a request to unmute.
Can you hear me? Hello? I'm hoping you can hear me. I can see myself, so I'm just going to get started. I wanted to speak briefly as a member of the SB 54 Implementation Working Group. SB 54 is a newly passed, first of its kind in the nation bill that would set up an extended producer responsibility program for all sorts of plastic packaging that is going to include cannabis packaging. And when it comes to cultivation, I want to note one thing specifically. There's an exemption within SB 54 that was intended to be for agricultural producers, in other words, cultivators, but unfortunately, it may not apply to cannabis cultivators due to the uniqueness of the DCC regulations. Specifically under SB 54, the term producer does not, quote, include a person who produces, harvests, and packages an agricultural commodity on the site where the agricultural commodity was grown or raised, end quote. So the thing you need to note is that packaging must take place at the same site for the exemption to apply. And by DCC regulations, cultivation licensees that allow for growing do not also allow for packaging at the same site. As I understand it, you need that type P cultivation license, or you need to be a manufacturer. But in a nutshell, this exemption in SB 54 may not apply to cannabis cultivators. And I've been raising this to the attention of the bill author's office. But if more cultivators, if more people in the industry were aware of this and brought it up, it might ensure that we can get some changes that ensure that exemption will apply to cannabis agricultural producers like all other agricultural producers in the state.
Thank you. Janine Coleman.
Good afternoon, members and staff. Janine Coleman, Executive Director of Origins Council. We represent 800 independently owned and operated small licensed cannabis businesses, predominantly small homestead farming families, in partnership with regional trade associations representing California's historic cannabis farming regions. For the past 8 years, our organizations have invested deeply in coalition advocacy on cannabis appellations. Our efforts have included both legislative and regulatory work, including participation in the CDFA Cannabis Appellations Working Group of 2019. Our advocacy on appellations policy has been informed by legal experts in the fields of intellectual property and geographical indications law and policy, as well as scientific advisors in the fields of botany, natural sciences, and social anthropology. This policy area is as complex and technical as it is exciting and hopeful, and is a top priority for us. We wanted to thank the DCC and Cannabis Advisory Committee for bringing appellations forward for consideration today, and we look forward to additional opportunities for in-depth stakeholder engagement with both the DCC and the California Department of Food and Agriculture in support of the near-term launch and implementation of California's Cannabis Appellations Program. Thank you for the opportunity to comment, and we look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you. Paul Hansberry, just sent you a request to unmute.
And this is Paul Hansberry from Lovingly and Legally. I would be remiss if we let a Cannabis Advisory Committee meeting go by without me advocating for a cottage microbusiness license. In times when distribution is so hard for the small farmer, distributors are, we all know about burner distros, but other legitimate distros are having a very difficult time. The ability to self-distribute, the ability to manufacture and perhaps make a value-added product if your product didn't come out to snuff and wasn't saleable, if the retail wasn't something that was most desirable by the market at hand, your ability to do that, the different benefits because of scale. For instance, a method of testing where you would be able to test the whole batch because it was all grown in a very small area under the same conditions, and then have the different strains that you might be tested, tested as just for potency and cannabinoid profile. This would help the small farmer. This is not intended for large-scale corporate grows. This is intended for the small cultivator and giving him the ability to, as he was under the 215. Thank you very much, and please, 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 let's have this discussion so that we can move forward with our small farmers. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, we have no other commenters on this agenda item. Would you like to close comment for this agenda item?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, so closing agenda item number 2 altogether, we can move on to agenda item number 3, where we're going to talk about appellation of origin and regulation recommendations. So the DCC is requesting feedback from the subcommittee on some elements of the appellation of origin program's labeling regulations. A little bit of background on the appellation of origin program. The California Department of Food and Agriculture, which I'm going to refer to as CDFA, is responsible for implementing the appellation of origin program for cannabis and cannabis products. CDFA has promulgated regulations that describe how cannabis businesses can request that CDFA establish an appellation of origin. As the oversight authority for the packaging and labeling of cannabis and cannabis products, DCC has established regulations on how appellations can be used in the context of packaging and labeling. Excuse me. The questions I'd like to pose for discussion by the subcommittee today is, how should an appellation be indicated on the labeling and advertising of cannabis goods? Example options might include specific terms, such as requiring the term appellation after the appellation name, or requiring a seal or logo to be used. Additional questions include, what is an appropriate transition time for businesses who do not meet the appellation of origin requirements to cease using the term in labeling and advertising? And also, what other regulatory steps if any, should DCC consider to strengthen appellation of origin requirements in the context of packaging and labeling? So members, should we have some discussion about this item?
Sounds good.
Member Brown?
I think utilizing a QR code can be beneficial, going down the road with this as information is going to be changing. People will join appellations, they might drop out of appellations for various reasons, but I think the QR code will, remain the same. I think it should also be easily noticeable from a distance because ideally down the line, it's going to be benefiting the consumer, not just the brand or the company that's also manufacturing or selling it. So for the consumer to be able to be standing anywhere from 5-10 feet away and notice some sort of emblem, whether it's a golden bear or a golden bear with a green leaf inside or vice versa, something that can be unique, but easily identifiable, and then that associated QR code. So after you make that purchase, or if you're considering it, you can scan the code and all this information would come up and the consumer could, see a picture of the farm maybe after they do a scan code. That's kind of the starting point I had in mind.
Thank you for that. I think the QR code could also really be beneficial to help consumers understand perhaps the standards associated with that appellation, right? It would be a great way to make additional information available to the public if they're interested in appellation products. I also, I think, what we see in other appellations, and especially in Europe, is seals. So tamper-resistant seals that have security features that are unique to the appellation program itself. And I think those can be a unique identifier. And the labeling, I think this is, in my mind, a little bit of a tricky question because we're talking about all cannabis products, right? Not just flower, but also manufactured products. And some of those packages can be quite small, right? So how do we create a pathway for consumers to really identify that they have an appellation product in their hands when we have very limited space on some of these packages, right?
Yeah. Well, like with, I've noticed on wines, some of them have the special little label thing on the top. I don't know what the organization is that does that rating system, but it's essentially, a verification, and it could be similar to that. It doesn't need to be large, but usually it's, kind of holographic or whatever, extra shiny, hard to replicate or hard to print one of your own.
Right. So I think what you're perhaps referring to is some kind of a secured tamper-resistant seal that is unique to the appellation of origin program. perhaps.
And I mean, a lot of the packaging too, depending on the style, requires some sort of tamper-proof seal or lid mechanism. So I think it could be integrated reasonably easily without it being a big cost burden on the suppliers or the manufacturers.
And any thoughts, Member Brown, on like labeling and how the appellation name might appear? Would that be perhaps embedded in the QR code, or would it be like a reserved space on the label in, I don't know, a specific type of font similar to wine that expresses an appellation?
I don't think, or it seems like it'd be really challenging to have enough actual space within that label that could have, 50 to 100 different abbreviations in it or names in it. Like a lot of these names might be long names. And so I don't know if each appellation will, have the ability to fit on there. So the QR code, I think, is a good digital way to do that. But I know also a lot of the farmers that are ambitious to utilize the appellation program, they're going to want some representation. And whether it was, a color code of some format, but, like you said, it's going to be really small. So to have 50 different styles that can fit within something and be easily detectable, I think is gonna be really challenging. I'm sure someone's gonna have some good ideas about it, but the QR code kind of solves that. It's, it's not ideal. And in some examples, there's a lot of products out there that utilize the name Trinity. And you can have, Trinity on there, but if it doesn't have the word appellation after it, then it's essentially just a product name. But some of these appellations, I suspect they're not just going to be small 2-3 syllable words. It might be a valley, or it might have a longer name associated to it that I don't know would always be able to fit on a small little label.
Okay, thank you. Seeing how it's just the two of us, do we have additional conversation before we go to public comment? Any other items you want to bring up related to these questions?
I guess just for clarity for myself and maybe members of the public, and it says the DCC is responsible for the labeling and packaging. And I guess I would wonder, where is the label going to be generated from? Is it going to be provided by the DCC, or is it going to come through CDFA and be approved by DCC?
I mean, I think the label is, like, labeling is the product creator's responsibility to create that label. And I think our job here is to have a conversation about, should there be a regulation that says something to the effect of, just as an example, that all appellation products have to say the name of the appellation on the front of the package in a font type, no, smaller than X, and I don't know, right? And then also perhaps utilize a logo or a seal that helps the consumer identify that product as appellation before, reading the label. I think that's where we're at. Am I correct? Yeah.
Yes, this is Angela McIntyre Abbott, counsel for the department. I just wanted to confirm Kristen's understanding. The department is seeking guidance from the subcommittee and the committee as a whole regarding what regulations related to the packaging and labeling of these appellation products will look like, and how that should look like in the department's regulations.
Yeah, so similar to the cannabis warning sign, for example, right? Should there be a universal seal or logo that goes on appellation products? And should there be regulation around how the appellation name is presented on the label?
Yeah, I feel like there's going to have to be some pretty strict consistency, even as far as the material actually goes. If you're going to have a shiny, tamper-proof little seal over the top, I think it's going to have to be consistent and the same. And I'm not sure as far as, I've never printed stickers or labels before, but the availability of a sticker that won't get, abused also by whatever bad players or something like that want to have a fake appellation product. But I don't know, like that, the capacity of the CDFA or someone to supply it, or it's kind of like the metric tags, you have to get them all from the same place, or they're provided all from the same place. So I think there has to be a higher level of quality control, keeping the label more or less identical in its material and in its visual presentation, as far as maybe each farm or entity could be, buying a roll of them blank, and then they're printing it through their printer that they already print their labels on, and they're able to bring it into their little supply chain themselves easily.
Okay. Any further discussion before we go to public comment?
I guess the only other thing that comes to mind is there any intention to work with any of the county ag departments in this process at all, or is this going to be all external from the central political borders and things of that nature?
I mean, I think that's probably a CDFA question, right? How that interaction would happen with the local agencies. But I realized we didn't talk about one of these questions. And so what happens when someone establishes an appellation of origin? For example, someone establishes the Salmon Creek appellation, and there's a bunch of Salmon Creeks throughout California, and someone already has, Salmon Creek cannabis, for example. So one of the questions that we've been asked to discuss today is, what is an appropriate transition time for the Salmon Creek cannabis brand to cease the use of Salmon Creek once the Salmon Creek appellation has been established? Right, because allowing both in the marketplace would create significant consumer confusion. And I believe the regulations that CDFA promulgated require a phase out of brands that are utilizing an appellation name once an appellation is established in that same name. I think there's suggestions that a year would be adequate. I don't know that I have necessarily an opinion or an educated comment on this, but I'm wondering if you've thought at all about timelines for phasing out.
I think 1 year is appropriate, or shortly within 1 year. A lot of, especially dry flower, has a 1 year shelf life for the most part. Typically, things are happening during the seasons, aside from indoor, I guess, which I don't think about as much as I probably should, but that's kind of outside of appellations anyways. And so if they're within the appellation program, it's full sun cannabis, and say 1 year is an appropriate time for that inventory to be liquidated or for those labels to be utilized before they have to correct or cease using.
And are there any things that, perhaps the DCC could do to strengthen the program from a labeling perspective? So again, these products are not just cannabis products that might be created within the appellation, say on the farm, or a community processor within the appellation. They're also products that may be created at a manufacturer, if the appellation allows for that to occur. So, are there any additional protections or regulations that you might think of for helping to kind of strengthen the appellation program's requirements in, relationship to packaging and labeling specifically?
I think the current fee right now is, or a fine is 100 to 500 for violations of labeling nature. And so I think having a higher fine for violating an appellation label would be beneficial. That's probably the best method I can think of to incentivize people not taking advantage of that. What do you think?
I would agree with you. The fee is small, and the fine, I should say, is small for misuse of an appellation packaging or labeling component. And I think it's hard, but I imagine there's a way to balance ensuring that the fee can't be utilized in a kind of a cost of doing business scenario, right? So I could see where an increased fee for misuse of an appellation name would be appropriate. And I don't know if those fees, do they compound or elevate to the next level if you're a repeat offender?
So just a point of clarification, I believe you are both referencing the disciplinary guidelines, and those only apply to formal administrative disciplinary processes. They don't apply to alternative disciplinary actions. The department has a number of tools it can use, including citations and other methods to take disciplinary action against licensees. There are a number of factors that are considered in the implementation of these fees, including the nature and gravity of the acts, actual or potential harm to the public, actual or potential harm to consumer, prior disciplinary records. So there's a number of factors. The fees and the disciplinary guidelines aren't a one-size-fits-all approach, and there are a number of factors that are considered.
But no factors related to unfair business practices.
I mean, that might be something that could be considered as far as, you know, the history of violations and any mitigating evidence.
Yeah, I suspect that it might be somewhat expensive for a group of individuals to establish an appellation of origin. There's a lot of thought and research and due diligence that's going to go into prepping that application. Plus, there's application fees associated with it, and then actual, I don't know the proper term, but I'm going to call it the standing up fee once you're approved, right, for the appellation. So it can be a costly process. I just would hate to see the program not have adequate protections in a manner that allows a brand to continue use because they can just pay some nominal fees and have it be a cost of doing business.
Angela McIntyre, counsel for the department. Just another point of clarification. Among the tools that the department can use include citations. So each citation would identify a fine, and it enables the department to assess administrative fines not to exceed 5,000 per violation by a licensee and 30,000 for unlicensed persons. So that's just another tool available outside of the disciplinary guidelines.
I'm going to ask another question. I'm sorry. So with these fines, is it, if I create, 500 counterfeit appellation products, you come find me, and I have a warehouse with 500 boxes of misused labeling. Is it one citation or is it 500 citations? Like one for each of those labels, or is it Kristen gets one citation for misusing the label, right?
So certainly the department will take a look at the particular facts and circumstances of the violation at issue, and that will factor into whatever the ultimate amount that's determined.
So it could go either way, it sounds like.
I mean, yeah, the department will look at all the facts to determine whether there's one violation or multiple.
Or it should be multiple. Okay, thank you very much for those responses. I appreciate it. Member Brown, would you like to add anything?
No, I'm all set.
Okay. Moderator, could we please go to public comment?
Absolutely, yes. We are now taking public comment on agenda item number 3. This topic, or this public comment period, is displayed on the slide, so please keep comments at this time limited to the agenda item. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon next to your name if you've logged into the meeting, or by pressing *3 if you've called into the meeting. For our in-person commenters, please raise your hand and our audience moderator will work with you. All commenters will have 2 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning, and each member will have 1 opportunity to speak on each agenda item. And with that, we will go to Mitchell Colbert. I've just sent you a request to unmute.
I'm hoping you can hear me all right again. So there has been a lot of talk about ways to strengthen our packaging labeling rules, specifically around appellations of origin. The number one way that I can think of to improve packaging and labeling rules around appellations, and more broadly, is allowing operators to display the myriad of required warnings and other notices via one QR code. The minimum required font size combined with the myriad of labeling requirements has created a regulatory minimum possible package size, which is dramatically larger than cannabis packaging was before DCC regulations were imposed. Larger packaging sizes harm cannabis cultivators and all other licensees by increasing packing and shipping costs. If we're going to be amending the packaging and labeling rules as part of the Appellations of Origin program, we should use it as an opportunity to also make packaging more environmentally and business friendly by allowing a QR code to display warnings and other labeling requirements. Allowing operators to display required information with the QR code also allows them the ability to include more information than just what is required. So beyond just saying the appellation of origin, they can describe their cultivation techniques, the terroir, whatever they want to do to paint that picture for their brand. They have a lot more flexibility if they can use that modern technology of a QR code. So please, let's use this as an opportunity to make our packaging much more sustainable. Let's get the packaging smaller to like it was pre-2016. Thank you.
Thank you. Zach, I've sent you a request to unmute. Zach? All right, we'll move on to Dylan Matoli. I've just sent you a request to unmute. There you go.
I wanted to discuss the labels. As a person who's currently working on developing an appellation, what I feel is very important is that there is very strong consistency in the appellation seal, and that it needs to be prominent so that the consumer will become familiar with it. I personally, with my farm, have several certifications, and just due to the lack of there just isn't a lot of consumer awareness around what these certifications mean. So I would hope that this can be something more prominent and consistent, maybe a seal that then displays that it is certified appellation, and then the ability for the individual appellations to customize that and make it slightly unique, but that it's all done in a very consistent way that the consumer can become familiar with. Regarding the time frame for other farms that are using the name of the approved appellation at that time, I think a year, it needs to be at least a year. And then regarding the penalties, I think this is a big thing for discussion, because we're looking at probably well over $100,000 in development of an appellation, and so there needs to be value in that, and there needs to be penalties if you abuse that. If it's only $100 or a couple $100, it just doesn't really, that's not in line with how much
30 seconds.
to develop the appellation. So, I think the fines do need to be substantial, and we already see in the marketplace people identifying as appellations, which are not actual appellations yet. So this is already something that is starting to happen. So I think those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Ross Gordon, I've sent you a request to unmute.
So thank you for this discussion, really important. As Origins Council, we're really strongly invested in a strong and credible appellations program, and these labeling conversations are really at the heart of that. So just appreciate the care that's being given to this discussion. Briefly want to support a couple things that I've heard discussed so far. We very much support a standardized appellation seal to give that clarity and prominence to consumers. We think it's worth considering a customized, unique interior field within a standardized seal that would be unique to each appellation as well. We also support very prominent appellation labeling, so that's clear to consumers. Want to support the comments around significant penalties for appellation misuse. As I think was mentioned, if it's just a cost of doing business to be able to misuse appellations, then I think we would expect, based on what we've seen in other industries, that people will absorb that cost of doing business. So definitely want to support more significant penalties for that bad faith approaches. In addition to that, also want to support establishing record-keeping requirements specifically for the geographic area of production for cultivation. Right now, the main way that enforcement works in terms of verifying that people are applying by appellation standards on the farm is record-keeping requirements. So making sure that there are record-keeping requirements for the geographic area of production, and that there's appropriate penalties associated with not keeping that documentation is really important for the credibility of the program from our perspective. Lastly, I really want to emphasize the trademark issue. I think it's really critical. 1 year, we do think, is a good time period. But in addition to that, really want to ask that those conflicting trademarks, that regulation be retroactive to trademarks in effect as of February 21st, 2020. This is the date when CDFA originally noticed that they wanted to put forward a regulation as it related to phasing out of existing trademarks. And if there's not that retroactive component, it's very likely we'll see a rush to register trademarks that would conflict with future appellations, which will really put a lot of problems as it relates to the whole program. So thank you for
Thank
your
you.
consideration today.
Paul Hansberry, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
Yes, hi, this is Paul Hansberry. I'll keep this brief. Origins Council seems to have done quite an extensive job in researching this and seem to be very dedicated to the concept of the appellations. And I reviewed their comments and they seem appropriate, and I just want to support them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Judy Strang, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
I'd like to bring a parent perspective to this conversation. I'm confused at what point the labeling or appellation occurs. Does it occur at the grow site and then follow the plant as it goes to manufacturing? Or does it occur once a new product is produced at manufacturing? Since it seems to parents that most products that hit the market are actually being headed into a manufacturing process. So that would be my question number one. And question number two, I think parents would really appreciate having some data regarding DCC's capacity to enforce labeling. Could we see what's been done in the past? And that would give us more confidence in what's being proposed for the future regarding enforcement of and completion of penalties. So perhaps going forward, if that's information that could be provided at this meeting, that would be great.
Thank you. Sam De La Paz, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
And I'm the Vice President of Hessel Range in Sebastopol, California. Also approved to speak on behalf of the California State Grange on issues that normalize cannabis. I believe that appellations absolutely falls into that. I'd like to support all of OC's comments. Comments being establish standardized appellation seal, require prominent labeling, strengthen penalties for appellation misuse, and establish and enforce record-keeping requirements demonstrating compliance with appellation production requirements. I agree with the previous speakers. I'd like to second Ross's sentiments and also the clarity around capacity to execute on any appellations, enforcement and labeling, et cetera, et cetera. Also, I think it's important to define the appellation on stream manufactured products. So yeah, those are my comments today. Just really support Origin Council's comments, Ross Gordon's comments as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Janine Coleman, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
Thank you. I'd like to speak on use of an appellation on downstream manufactured products. Cannabis appellations are structured in California law to be an exclusive standards-based legal designation that's awarded to organized groups of outdoor cultivators who've researched and developed an appellations petition that substantiates that their proposed appellation region has a reputation for historic cannabis farming and that they produce cannabis that has regionally distinct qualities or characteristics. The approach to regulating the downstream use of an appellation on a manufactured product should be carefully considered with this in mind, as it will impact appellation producers, consumers, the integrity of the program as a whole, and the California cannabis supply chain as a whole. The standard for an appellation product is really that the qualities or characteristics of the product are regionally distinct as experienced by the consumer. In the case of cannabis concentrates, this metric can be met depending on the type of concentrate. For example, live rosin could meet that metric. However, isolate likely would not. Furthermore, authorizing manufacturers to use the appellation on derivative products, that is, products that have cannabis as one of potentially many ingredients, would require distinctive language on the label that indicates the manufactured product was made with appellation designated cannabis, in order to ensure that consumers are not being misled to believe that all of the ingredients are appellation designated. But however,
30 seconds.
overall, I just like to say the use of an appellation on derivative products and manufactured products in general, because with the program and the way that it's structured in policy, really pertains to cultivators and cannabis. And the matter of use on manufactured products is heavily debated within the international geographic indications community due to the significant potential impacts to appellation programs as a whole and to appellation producers. So we believe that these issues warrant further policy research and stakeholder input prior to undertaking rulemaking. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Adrian Keys, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
Adrian Keys from the Trinity County Agriculture Alliance up here in Trinity County. I can keep it brief. I support 100% all the recommendations from the Origins Council, and particularly appreciate Janine Coleman's take just now on how the appellation system is intended to be applied. It is all about the causal links and the specific geography and topography and whatnot of where the cannabis is produced, and that needs to be preserved to make this program effective. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Riggs, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
I'm Indy Riggs of Galactic Farms in Humboldt County, a small craft family terroir farm. I would like to use my time to underline the importance of the recommendations made by Mr. Ross Gordon and the Origins Council. In light of the recent move to reschedule cannabis in the U.S. from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 narcotic, the recommendations made by the Origins Council are vital and urgent. Additionally, in 2020, cannabis was descheduled from Schedule 4 in the International Treaty of the Single Convention, the main treaty governing international law on narcotics. Schedule 4 was the most restrictive schedule, and though it's internationally Schedule 1 still, according to this treaty, the removal of Schedule 4 classification is speculated to be done as a way to ease into medical cannabis and develop a very similar model to California's 1996 Prop 215 internationally. These actions being taken by federal and international governing bodies are harbingers of what is to come, and we must be prepared. It's imperative to have specific seals and logos that would provide protections and to eventually conform or be absorbed by organizations such as the World Intellectual Property Organization and the Lisbon System, which provides international protections of appellations of origins and geographical indications. It is very important to use foresight when discussing and making these recommendations, as this will make the entire process much more efficient and could be the model of our entire country to adopt once the barriers of prohibition are finally dissolved federally and internationally. We must think and plan accordingly. Thank you for the chance to comment, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Jude Philman, I've just sent you a request to unmute. Go ahead. Jude? All right, we'll move on to Michael Katz. I've just sent you a request to unmute.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Katz. I'm the Executive Director of the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance. We represent over 140 individual businesses located in Mendocino County, and we are calling in support of the Origins Council recommendations related to this agenda item. Definitely support the appellation seal and the prominent appellation labeling, the one-year transition as identified in the document that was presented, and the strengthening for penalties of appellation misuse, the record-keeping requirements, and the notice of use expiration. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Justin Gibbons, I've just sent you a request to unmute. There you go.
I am a cultivator in Mendocino County in Cobolo and a manufacturer distributor in the city of Santa Rosa. I also sit on the board of the Sonoma County Cannabis Alliance and I'm a Hazel Grange member. And I just wanted to support Origins Council's comments and their work. Same goes with Ross Gordon and Janine Coleman and Michael Katz. So yeah, I think the Origins Council is doing fantastic work in this arena, and you know, we need to support that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, last call for agenda item number 3. Okay, Chair Nevedal, there are no more comments on agenda item number 3. Would you like to close this item?
Ms. Tillman did not come back in to the meeting?
Not that I see.
Okay, then I think we should go ahead and close public comment. Thank you. Okay, lots of really great comments. So thank you, everyone.
Actually, pardon me, she may have called in. So there's one more. I'd like to give her an update.
Would you
It
please?
looks like another person. So hold on a minute.
Thank you.
Calling user number 5. I've just sent you a request to unmute. Calling user number 5.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, the WebEx prompts are very confusing. This is John Brower from Trinity County. I also support the Origins Council comments on this item, and would also encourage the commission to have a more global conversation about the appellations as a whole. Perhaps a presentation from CDFA and kind of a status report, an update on where they are at with the appellation subject generally. And it's going to get real messy having 2 different state agencies both having their finger in this appellation enforcement pie. So I think it's imperative that those matters get worked out sooner than later, and we figure out what lanes who's going to be in, and really make these appellation of origins have some real teeth and some real meaning and value in the marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you. Now public comment is closed for agenda item number 3. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Member Brown, do you want to kick off the conversation as we bring it back?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that stood out was the request for a standardized label. And I like the part where the request was made to have it standardized, but also a field that can be customizable, such as if the name of the appellation is able to fit on the label. I like that. That resonated with me. But otherwise, it seemed like everyone appreciated our previous discussion and findings also.
Yeah, I have concerns about a seal that would have the ability to be writable, A, and B, that would have enough space within it to actually have the name be identifiable.
Mm-hmm.
So those 2 pieces, I like both of those pieces, right? Having a seal with a tamper-resistant, maybe a tamper-resistant seal with a security logo on it that every appellation product wears. But I think the name probably needs to be displayed separately so that it's legible. Because I don't, there's not a lot of space on those packages. How do you get a thumbnail sized, at the biggest seal on a package and then write a name in it?
Yeah.
That gives me pause. And I think, the consumer is already somewhat trained to look for appellation names on wine bottles, right? So If we look at how the wine labeling works, you have the brand name and then the appellation name is always on the front label, under the wine name, right, in a specified font size. And I kind of feel like there's some value to drawing some parallels and trying to keep it simple and somewhat recognizable to consumers based on how they're used to seeing these appellations or the AVA labels presented. I love the QR code, but I don't know how you customize the QR code to also have like a seal within it. And I don't know if a QR code alone would be branding enough, right?
Well, and I was thinking too, a lot of these companies or products are going to have their own label, their brand label on it, and they're easily customizable. So they could always put on their own label and, you know, in their own size font or whatever fits, whatever XX appellation. So that could kind of cover that requirement. And then the QR code that's embedded in the seal tamper-proof label, if it was embedded and it went to the appellations program through CD FA, then it would kind of cover those bases and give everybody the freedom to display their appellation name in their own font or their own text or whatever, but then it still has the standardized seal with the QR code that links it.
So I am so not knowledgeable about QR codes. Do they need to be like a minimum size to actually function? I mean, most of the ones I see are fairly large. But can they be as small as?
They're getting pretty small. And I think there's some newer technology that's, you know, aside from just the QR squares, they're using dots and some other smaller detectable indicators, I think.
So I think one of the things that comes to mind for me when we talk about technology embedded in a tamper-resistant seal with the logos, I imagine the more complex that seal is, right, the more it's going to cost the user of that technology. And I'm not talking about the consumer, I'm talking about the product maker that's going to put the label, right? Because if we're suggesting that the DCC perhaps issue some sort of security seal that is a branding mechanism, right, for appellation of origin, issuing those seals, each seal is going to have a price tag on it, I would imagine. And so is a security seal enough? Is there more cost that will go into it if you put a QR code on it? If you put a universal QR code on it, it would go, I would imagine, simply to one site, like the CDFA's appellation page where you could look up the appellation name to get more information as a consumer, right? I don't think, I don't know if it would be cost effective to have a different QR code issued for every unique appellation.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm sorry, all of these things are kind of coming to mind as I'm looking through this.
And I don't know all the, you know, available technology with QR codes, but it could be that maybe the brand or the farm could, you know, acquire the tamper-proof material one way or another, either through their own purchase or it's supplied through DCC or CDFA, but maybe they would be able to print their own unique QR code on top of that and embed it on their own. It sounds like we need some QR code reconnaissance.
Yes, some expertise would be lovely. But I think, you know, the one thing that I really appreciate the comments about record keeping, because as I was listening to public comment and the comments come up about record keeping, I mean, if I was a DCC inspector and I came to your farm and you're using an appellation name, how would I know if you were eligible to use that appellation name if there's not a requirement for records for me to review? So that was I really appreciated that. And I had a couple other notes here. I think consistency is really going to be important for consumer awareness. And, I think it has to be easily identifiable and unique, right? And so we have a lot of certification seals, and those are logos that are going to stack up, right? Sun and Earth, OCal, and they're going to keep going, right? So I'm less of a fan of adding a logo because I think they can get lost amongst each other. I like the kind of more traditional, if we just mimic it after a more traditional Appalachian type product, I think there's a lot of value in that. And the penalties, I think the penalties need to be robust. I don't know if a $100 to $500 penalty is robust enough. But I think it would be robust enough if it was applied per label. So just to really discourage the misuse of that labeling, like we're really talking about labeling here. So if it was, $100 to $500 per misuse. As far as like, if it was someone comes to my farm and they're like, Kristen, you misused this appellation label, we're going to fine you $100 to $500. I don't really think there's a lot of teeth in that. But if someone came to my farm and said, you misused the appellation label, and I'm seeing 500 labels that you have on products here, I would be mortified, right? Mm-hmm. If it was $100 to $500 for each of my labels that I had, placed onto a final form product, that's a really big difference.
Or maybe that product would be seized.
Yes. Wow, that would be really a painful experience, for a producer to have those products seized for misuse of an appellation label.
Mm-hmm. And I'll bring up again any opportunity to utilize a local ag department or local ag staff. They could essentially be doing the verifications on if they're complying with their appellation requirements. I don't know what the capacity is of all the different counties ag department staff, but I think in a lot of especially the rural counties, there seems to be a capacity to bring that into some of their oversight.
I also think that when I was preparing for today, I had working on appellation program development. I had concerns about utilizing appellation of origin products or the appellation of origin name on a manufactured product. I really appreciate the suggestion for a made with, and it makes a lot of sense because as Ms. Coleman mentioned, and I agree with her that, flour and some of the extracted products such as keef or say a water hash, they're going to have the full expression of the plant material, right, that product was made with. But an isolate is not going to have that full expression. And so it's hard to draw the parallel, perhaps, that isolate still has a distinctive and unique quality based on the region where it was produced. And within DCC regulations, there are different labeling requirements, I believe, for non-manufactured and manufactured products. And so perhaps we should consider that for appellation as well, just to provide greater protections for those appellations. They are expensive, as we heard, to develop. They're time consuming. And I think they're really a tremendous opportunity for especially remote and rural producers, but they're a tremendous opportunity for farmers in general. And If we're going to have them realize that opportunity, I think we have to be really mindful about how the branding and how that product is reflected or identified for the public, right? So one other thought I had too is there's primary label requirements and secondary label requirements in DCC regulations, right? So the primary label is what would go on the front of the package. Is that correct? I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. Yes.
Yes, this is Angela McIntyre Abbott. Yes, primary labeling.
So when and I wish I had done more research. I'm so sorry for asking all these questions, but I know that you have to label, I think, the license that created the product, right? Is that a primary label or a secondary label requirement? Does it go on the back or does it have, it goes on the back? Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so this has me thinking about requiring that the appellation name be on the primary label, right? So it's not potentially confused with the person who, or the entity that put the final form product together, right, so to speak. So we don't want to have any confusion between those two names is part of what I'm leaning towards. And I don't know, Member Brown, do you have thoughts? Do you have a motion you've been sketching out over there perhaps?
Oh,
or-
motion? No, no motion. I feel like we've covered a lot of, the both sides of the spectrum as far as the minimal requirements and kind of fancier, more technology savvy opportunities for it. I like your idea about the primary label and the brand or the company being able to print their appellation on their own label without it being on anything fancy. And then essentially having that tamper-proof fancy seal. But like the ones on the wine label, they're very thin, they're very small. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a huge expense. And they're so small, one roll is gonna go a long ways. I think it would be neat, and it's more down the line, but to have some follow-up on the QR code technology and maybe try to hear from either CDFA or I'm sure someone's kind of looked into it as far as how specific can a QR code get? Can we print it on different materials? And if there's already some intention with the appellation program to integrate a QR code through any of their processes.
And when we think about where that appellation name would be on the primary panel, does it make sense to have it be like directly under the brand name? Similar to wine, right? You have the wine might say, Benzinger, and then it would have the appellation name under
Yeah.
the wine.
Yeah, I mean, I think the concept is that they're trying to promote themselves, and so it's not going to do much good to have it on the back label in small print. So they're going to be proud about the appellation instinctively, I think. And so it'll probably be on the front. Whether that should be a requirement, I could go either way, but it seems like they would want to do that for themselves already.
I mean, I think if it's always in the same place on the primary panel, it's so much easier to train the consumer essentially what to look for.
Yeah.
Right. So if I was a consumer and I had to know somewhere on the primary panel, there might be an appellation name. I don't know that I would always find it.
Yeah.
I can provide some added clarification on what is currently on the primary panel for non-manufactured cannabis goods. Again, this is Angela McIntyre, counsel for the department. The identity of the product, the net weight of the cannabis in the package listed in both metric and US customary units, the universal symbol described. The label for non-manufactured cannabis shall also include an informational label that includes the UID, the name of the licensed cultivator or licensee packaging the product, the date of packaging for retail sale, and the required government warnings.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Would you like to have a formal motion?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Please.
Well, I'll move that, I might have to adjust my wording, but that the GCC look into the possibility for adopting a standardized universal unique label, tamper-proof label that can be utilized for the Appalachian program. I guess that'd be the minimal.
And I have a couple questions, if I may. Are you proposing that the DCC would actually issue the entire label, or that they would create a standardized format for that labeling?
No, I think they should issue the label for a couple reasons. One, that's how the metric labels are issued already. You know, they come through at, you know, the fees embedded into the cost of the permits, I suspect, or the fee of the permits. And I was kind of going to get to this in the item 4, but it would also be, you know, the initial license review is the most timely and most expensive. And now that licensees, especially cultivators, are coming within CEQA compliance, it would seem that the review and the, you know, licensee maintenance is going to be lesser and lesser. So I would expect that there should be some buffer finance in there that could supply the tags to the Appalachian certified cultivators. Yeah, I don't know, you know, in the motion, I don't know how much detail is really desired or would be beneficial as far as the QR code or holographic label.
And I'm over here desiring detail. I think that DCC is asking for some more detailed suggestions. You know, what comes of it is, you know, will be seen, but I mean, I would prefer, I think, a motion or a recommendation that, you know, clearly sets an expectation for where and how the name of the appellation will be presented, includes the issuance of a tamper-resistant security seal that is used only on appellation of origin products and has is unique enough for the consumer to clearly identify those products as an appellation of origin product. I would prefer the name to have a made with for manufactured products. I would like to see record keeping implemented. And I would like to see the fee be per label fee.
You mean the fine penalty?
Uh-huh.
And you want that all wrapped into one motion?
I mean, theoretically, it would save time, but I mean, this is kind of where I'm leaning, and I'm not saying that I'm not open to other.
Maybe we can break it into a couple parts. And so as far as the label goes, I guess the exact wording I would look for would be tamper-proof, unique in appearance, such as hologram or holographic, and to learn if we can implement a QR code within that.
So I'm gonna just go back to nomenclature here for a moment. So when I think of label, I think of actually like the DCC issuing that primary panel, right? That primary label. And I don't know that that's realistic or wise, because we're going to have products of all different sizes and shapes, right? And so I think the label that's on the product, the primary panel, I think we would be wise to continue to allow the appellation of origin product maker, whether it's a manufacturer, non-manufactured product, allow them to still create their own label, but have a clear requirement for how they present that appellation name on the primary panel. And then I like the secondary, I think it's a little more realistic for DCC to issue a unique appellation of origin, security, tamper-resistant label that just, is separate from the primary panel or the secondary panel, right? And you use it for your tamper-resistant seal. So I just think it would be less expensive. And folks change packaging pretty gosh darn quickly. I don't know how DCC would keep up with, say a processor or manufacturers ever changing packaging and, well, now I need round labels. Well, now I need square labels. Well,
I
now-
wasn't suggesting anything about the primary label,
Okay, so when you're saying label,
just with the tamper-proof seal.
okay,
Yeah,
great.
sorry, label was the wrong word. Tamper-proof seal, unique in appearance with a QR code.
That would be amazing.
That would be, I think, the, high-end goal. As far as, like I said, in the motion, do we want to have it per the subtopics in the agenda item?
I think we can do it that way.
Okay,
I think I think there's a number of ways we can do this. So it doesn't have to be one motion. We can have multiple motions. But we would have to start one motion at a time. We can't entertain multiple motions at a time. So if we wanted to bring a motion forward, we could then move that motion and then we could come back and we could add to it.
yeah, let's just do it by the bullet points of the agenda item. And, or that would be my suggestion.
Okay, I'm happy to follow that suggestion.
Okay, so I would move that the labeling and advertisement of cannabis goods from the appellation program be indicated by a tamper-proof, unique in appearance, what's the word we're looking for? Not label. Seal.
Tamper-resistant seal?
Yeah, tamper-resistant seal, ideally with a embedded QR code.
And would you consider also within this motion requiring or making a recommendation on how the name should appear on the primary label?
I would leave it out of this part of the motion. If we wanted to make a second motion, looking
About
at
that
that, I think we could do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I will second your motion. So you might need to read it back for our note taker, please.
So the motion would be that the DCC adopt a tamper-proof, unique in appearance, such as holographic. Okay. What is it? Seal, tamper-proof seal. Embedded with the QR code, or ideally, that'd be the bonus.
Okay, so just to make sure that I got it so I can second it. DCC should adopt a tamper-proof, unique in appearance seal that's embedded with a QR code.
Correct.
Okay, I will second that motion. Do we need to discuss this motion further?
I don't.
I don't either. So may we call a vote on this motion, please?
Absolutely. So I'm going to reiterate, the recommendation is that the DCC should adopt a tamper-proof, unique in appearance seal, ideally embedded with a QR code. So now I will take call roll, and if you can please say yay or nay. Chair Nevedal?
Aye. Yay.
Member Brown?
Yay.
All right. Motion carries.
Okay, great. On to our next labeling question. What do we do with this name?
I think, I'm hesitant to make any motion that's going to interfere with a brand's ability to print. Like the size of the text or the type of font. There's just so many out there, and each label is so unique in its color scheme and its text and fonts. I don't think we want to regulate that so much. So I think it would be, if there were to be a motion, it would be surrounding the word and the use of appellation on it.
Or maybe we keep it really simple. I mean, is it going to be confusing to the consumer to see appellation names in purple and red and black and green and, right? Should it just always be in black, no smaller than the minimum font on the primary panel? I mean, do you have any of those concerns?
I don't have it as my concern is that, so many of these logos and brands are so artistic in nature, and to kind of override their ability to have artistic expression and marketing stuff. I don't want them to have to say, oh, black, it doesn't mix with our color scheme. Now we need to redo all these labels or something like that. The concept I like, but the practicality of it being implemented onto all the small businesses or businesses in general, I think that it could be, what's the word? Just a little bit too much control. I think if they're using the word appellation, or if I were to make a motion, it would be something about that the word appellation needs to be, presented on the primary label, but I don't think I would feel comfortable implementing a color scheme that they have to abide by, or a font size or style at this point, at least, without hearing more feedback from public or.
And do you have any concerns about individuals integrating the appellation name into their logo?
No, I think that if they're using the word appellation, that is gonna have its legal requirement that they're abiding by, from within the program.
I have some concerns about integrating it into the logo. But I don't know if maybe we don't go there and don't worry about it either way, perhaps. But I do think the name of the appellation should be on the primary panel, kind of like predominantly on the front of the package. And it should, I mean, if it could always be in the same spot, which is really hard with so many different sizes and shapes of packages, and wine bottles are standardized, right? We have high shoulder bottles and low shoulder bottles. We have clear bottles and brown bottles and green bottles. We don't have, square bottles and
There's boxes.
this is true. But for the most part, it's a very standardized, packaging is very standardized.
Yeah.
So it's relatively easy to, I think, have an expectation that the name will appear in the same manner in relatively the same location, right, on every bottle of wine, so to speak. This is a little trickier because we have so much diversity in packaging.
Yeah.
But what if we were to make a recommendation that the DCC adopt regulations that require the appellation name to appear on the primary panel of non-cannabis products? And you really like utilizing the term appellation, right? So would it be, for example, the appellation name followed by the term appellation? That's what.
Yeah, I think so.
So let me start over again. Let me see if I can frame this motion and not get lost. So recommend that the DCC adopt regulations that require for non-manufactured products that the appellation name appear on the primary label and followed by the term appellation, and that for manufactured products, the appellation name appear on the primary panel embedded within, made with the name of the appellation followed by the term appellation.
Yeah, I can support that.
Okay, so you'll second my motion.
I'll second your motion.
Okay, excellent. I hope somebody wrote that down because it's hard to think of it and write it at the same time. I'm so sorry.
Our note taker requests that you repeat it.
Okay, I will do my best. So recommend that the DCC adopt labeling recommendations that requires the non-manufactured products label the appellation name on the primary panel in a manner that says the appellation name followed by the term appellation. Okay. For manufactured products, the appellation name should be noted on the primary panel with wording that says made with, followed by the appellation name and then the term appellation.
I'm going to say that back.
Please, please do.
Recommend.
Mike.
Recommend that DCC adopt labeling requirements that require non-manufactured products. I lost part of it as well. To have the appellation of origin appear on the primary panel with the name of the appellation followed by the term appellation. For manufactured products, the recommendation is that the appellation of origin appear on the primary panel with made with name appellation.
Correct.
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, I still second.
Okay, great. Do we need to discuss that further?
I don't think so.
Okay, moderator, could we please call a vote?
Yes, in just a moment, we're going to read it back for the record that they're dropping in so just one moment.
And yeah, I will say that it would be great to hear from members of the public or cultivators, manufacturers, if they would love some requirement, down the line. But
So I think that there's definitely the possibility for, I still would like to go to a vote, but I think, future agenda items, if there's more that needs to be discussed on this topic, I imagine the public could recommend that, right, more discussion occur during future agenda items.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to read this back. The subcommittee recommends that DCC adopt regulations for labeling requirements to require that appellation name followed by the term appellation on the primary panel of the label. For manufactured products, the recommendation is to include the made with and the name of the appellation and then appellation on the primary panel.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, then let's take a vote. Chair Nevedal?
Yes.
Member Brown?
Yay.
All right, that motion passes as well.
Great, thank you so much. Any other labeling?
Nope.
Okay, so let's go on to the next component of labeling, which is appropriate transition timelines. And I do think a year is appropriate. So I imagine the DCC would notify, or CDFA or both would notify someone about their improper use, and then the clock would start ticking, right? There'd be some sort of formal notification that would happen. And then the 1 year countdown for changing that label would start if we went with a year. I mean, I feel comfortable with that. I hear the public concern about trademarks. I really desire a very robust appellation of origin program for cannabis. worked on this for a really long time. I somewhat Puritan believes that the appellation of origin should knock any of those trademarks out. I don't care how old they are, right? So and this is part of the value of establishing an appellation. People are going through a tremendous amount of time, putting a lot of thought into this. There's a lot of community organizing that they're having to do to get to the point of submitting a petition. And I think we really want this to be a well-protected program, a well-protected opportunity for the Appalachian farmers. At least that's what I'm hoping for. Which seems a little selfish, but I just think it's such a great opportunity if it's put together in a really thoughtful manner and has robust protections in place. So
I'll make a motion that the DCC adopt 1 year as the appropriate transition time for businesses who do not meet the appellation of origin requirements.
I will second your motion. And further conversation or discussion on this motion? All right, let's go directly to a vote then, please.
Give that 1 second. All right, the recommendation is for DCC to adopt 1 year as the appropriate transition time for business that do not meet the appellation of origin requirements.
Yes.
All right, let's take a vote. Chair Nevedal
Yes.
and Member Brown.
Yay.
That motion also passes.
Okay, we're just moving through this. All right, so kind of the final component here is to have some discussion and perhaps a recommendation regarding steps that the DCC might consider to strengthen the appellation of origin program or the requirements in relationship to packaging and labeling. And, you know, I think there's a little bit of difference between mislabeling a bunch of products and still having them on your premise versus mislabeling a bunch of products and having them in the marketplace. How you regulate that is a little numbing, like just, I'm not sure. But maybe there's elevated fees that could be in place for actually putting those products into the marketplace, right? So I think the $100 to $500 fee might be appropriate if DCC shows up and I'm sitting on a stack of mislabeled products, right? But I think there's more onus if I knowingly put those products into the marketplace where consumers have access to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if, and I don't know how, I mean, is that something that Metric would capture? This is really tricky. But then also if there's a seal that's issued by the DCC and it serves as a security, right, a branding and a security component, it might make the mislabeling more of a challenge because there would hopefully be a program to educate the consumer to look for this seal, right? This tamper-resistant seal. So you know for sure that your product truly is appellation, even if it purports an appellation name on it.
Mm-hmm.
So just, I'm just kind of trying to tease out if there's some sort of trigger that could create additional penalties, or if the penalties are enough, if a seal goes into place. I don't know, Member Brown, do you have thoughts on this?
You know, I'd say you have the misuse of a seal, and then you might also have someone printing their own seals and like a fake replicate.
Counterfeit seals.
And the people that are having legit seals, they also have the product that has all the metric information on it. And so you're able to tie together the point of origin to that appellation, you know, kind of a twofold on each package. if someone is taking those labels and then using them on a product that's not from Appalachia, that's going to be tricky for someone to discover. It's not going to be easily triggered. Someone's going to have to, look at the jar and look it up and be like, hey, this isn't an Appalachia farm or whatever. And so without getting, wrapped into the weeds of that, I think if if there's a replica label or, a black market label, then I think that would be one thing. If a legit Appalachia label is being misused, that would be kind of the other one.
So teasing it out a little bit, misuse of the name versus misuse of a seal.
Well, no, it'd be misuse of the seal still, either misuse of the seal or a false replica of the seal. And yeah, I guess you would assume if there's a seal, then there's going to be the Appalachia. So mistakes will happen at some point, and something might get mislabeled. Maybe a batch of indoor flower gets labeled as an Appalachia farm because of some supply chain error or the automatic packaging system error or something of that nature. And just to be able to distinguish a mistake and an error versus an intentional opportunity to take advantage of the Appalachia, to seek out a higher price or pretend like you have a better quality product than you do.
Hi, this is Angela McIntyre, counsel for the department. I just wanted to clarify that the department's current disciplinary guidelines and regulations kind of outline a number of tools that can be used to factor kind of the degree of the violation and the nature and the pervasive nature. There's notices to comply, there are citations. There's a variety of tools depending on the scope and nature of the particular violations at play. So just food for thought as
Yeah.
you're forming a motion.
And, if we don't want to get too complex, maybe we just say that we would ask that the DCC adopt a assessment based on either a per label assessment. So if it's 2 jars that got mislabeled versus 10,000, that's going into their analysis of the severity of the potential fine or fee or disciplinary action. Because they're going to be looking at it case by case regardless.
Right.
And so we could at least advocate that some of their analysis is based on the actual quantity of labels that were mismarked or misprinted.
So I think I need to think of a couple examples in my head. So misuse of an Appalachian name, for example, might be if the flower product has material that's not 100% from the Appalachian name stated on the package, right? Because it's possible that farmers may have some portion of Appalachian product coming from that farm and some portion of product that's not part of the Appalachian grown on the farm, right? So because folks might do outdoor cultivation in the ground, they also might have some of their square footage be mixed light, which would not qualify for Appalachian, for example, right? So, there's concerns, I think, about, and not just with farmers, but also, in the manufacturing sector, non-Appalachian material getting into the Appalachian supply chain, so to speak, right? So that's, I think, one component of concern or one aspect of misuse. But when we look at having a seal, counterfeiting that seal, I think, is a whole nother level of misuse, right? You're not just misusing the name, you're forging the appellation, so to speak, right? It's completely fraudulent because there could be accidents that happen where material is accidentally commingled, for example, right? And there could be knowingly commingle.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's gonna be impossible, in my view, it's gonna be impossible for anyone to be figuring that out. It's just impossible. So like I said, I would probably, any recommendations on this last bullet point, I would, do an assessment of fine based on per label quantity. Or you could recommend some tiered penalties or something, but there's so many details that go into it, and as you're pointing out, but I don't think that we're going to be able to come up with a regulatory step that's going to eliminate someone's ability to tamper with their flower. They could put in a greenhouse flower and say it's their Appalachia full sunflower. No one's gonna ever know. It's just impossible.
So what if we considered the current $100 to $500 fine being applicable to each instance of misuse of the appellation name, and then consider an additional fine for counterfeiting the seal? I mean, making counterfeit seals should have its own penalty associated with it. I think it's above and beyond the misuse of the name. So say someone, if all of these recommendations move forward that we've made so far, and there's, primary labeling requirement, and there's a seal that's created, a tamper-resistant seal that's created, misusing the name, I think, is one thing, but if you're full-on fraudulently labeling an appellation name and counterfeiting the seal, I think that should be a more extensive penalty, frankly. A question. I know that the DCC fines are tiered, like there's minor, moderate, and major, I think. So is the $100 to $500 a minor penalty, or?
So the disciplinary guidelines, as I mentioned earlier, they only apply to formal administrative disciplinary processes, and they don't apply to the alternative disciplinary actions available to the department, such as citations and fines. There is an exception where an accusation has been filed for failure to pay an assessed administrative fine or comply with an order of abatement. However, as you asked, the various tiers, there are 3 types of violations identified in the disciplinary guidelines. Serious, which are violations that preclude or significantly interfere with the enforcement of any state law, or those violations which cause significant false, misleading, or deceptive business practices, potential for significant or environmental harm, or for repeat moderate violations. Moderate, which are violations that undermine enforcement of any state law, are likely to cause public or environmental harm, or are a repeat minor violation. And finally, minor violations, which are violations that are not likely to have an adverse effect on public safety or environmental health.
And so the $100 to $500 fee for labeling is in the minor category, is that?
I would have to confirm, but I
Okay.
believe that is the case.
Okay.
Okay, well, I would make a motion stating that we recommend that the DCC develop different penalties for the quote-unquote misuse of appellation name or seal, and for counterfeit seals, but shall be no less than $500.
I think I can second that motion. Yeah, I'll second that motion. Thank you for simplifying that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. Further discussion? No. Moderator, would you call the vote, please?
As soon as we get the
Thank you.
verbiage.
You want me to restate it? We recommend that the DCC develop different penalties for misuse of appellation name or seal and for counterfeit seals, but shall be no less than $500.
Great.
Okay, I'm going to reiterate that. The committee recommends that DCC develop different penalties for the misuse of appellation or seal or counterfeit seals and shall be no less than $500.
Correct. That's clear?
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Then we will take a vote. Chair Nevedal
Aye.
and Member Brown.
Yay.
All right, that motion passes as well.
Okay, and I think the last component here, do we want to talk about record keeping?
I'm happy to talk about any of it. Yeah, we can talk about it. I didn't have a chance. I looked over the actual language of, appellation requirements, lightly. But is that already, it's not a requirement?
I mean, there's some record keeping requirements, I believe, in the CDFA regulations, right? And so I'm not sure. I mean, I think one of the things is it probably needs to be crystal clear that the DCC, that those records should remain on site at all time and be readily available for the DCC to verify that that product that they're seeing on that site is truly part of an appellation of origin.
And that would essentially be their application and verification letter of acceptance.
I would think so, yes, and probably their operating procedures,
Yeah.
right? Because they would have to reflect the standards that were put in place by the appellation.
Yeah. But I think, yeah, that's all embedded in their application to be approved. So even if it's just basic as required that the application in its entirety and the approval letter from CDFA be kept on site at all times.
Yeah, so the standards are readily available for DCC inspectors to review and verify.
You want form of a motion?
That would be lovely.
Okay. We move that the DCC require that the appellations applicant or application
producer?
Yes, each appellation producer has their original application on file, and also the I think it's the verification notification, or the, I don't know what the legal term is, but because it's publicly noticed.
Right.
So there's some legally binding terms that we may want to use.
So I think we could probably ad lib a little bit with the making sure that the approved petition, right? The petition as approved is on
So
hand.
the entire application and the approved.
The petition, and then there's the notice of
The public.
approval, the public notice of approval.
And do we need to verify that those are like the legal words we need to use or want to use, or?
I don't think so. I think DCC will align nomenclature
Okay.
accordingly, right? Yeah. So,
Okay, do we need to restate it? Because it's kind of blambled on halfway through.
yes, please.
Yeah.
Because I have to formally second, and we're circular here a little bit.
Okay, so the DCC will require that applicants maintain their,
You want me to take a crack at it?
yeah,
Okay.
I messed up the wording.
Okay. Recommend that the Department of Cannabis Control require that appellation of origin participants maintain the petition as approved and the public notice of approval of said appellation on site at all times, and make that paperwork readily available to DCC inspectors for verification upon a site visit or inspection.
Okay, if you can say it twice, we've got a
Oh, good
motion.
Lord. Would you second that?
Yes, I see.
Okay. And do I need to try to do that again?
Yeah, we got 3 people typing.
Okay. Recommend that the DCC
Recommend
establish a regulation that requires appellation of origin producers to maintain a copy of the approved petition plus the notice of approval on site at all times and make that paperwork readily available to the DCC for purposes of inspection. Got it? Okay.
All right. I'm going to reiterate that. The motion is that DCC require that each appellation of origin producer maintain a copy of the approved petition and the public notice of approval on site at all times and make that paperwork available readily to the DCC for the purposes of inspection.
Yes,
Got
thank
it.
you.
Okay, wonderful. We'll move on to a vote then. Chair Nevedall
Aye.
and Member Brown.
Yay.
All right. 4 for 4.
All right. Are there any other items we should discuss in relationship to appellation of origin today, Member Brown?
At this time, I'm pretty content with what we've gone over.
Okay, fabulous. We are an hour and 47 minutes in. Maybe we should do a short, just a really short break for everyone. So 5 minutes would work for me. Does anyone need longer? No? Okay, let's do a quick 5-minute break. So that would have us returning at, how about we say, so we're not on an odd number, let's make it a little longer and do 2:55 for return. Okay, thank you. Yes, please.
All right, we are back from our break, and I'm going to take roll call to make sure we still have quorum. So Chair Nevidal
Present.
and Member Brown.
Present.
All right, very good. Looks like we'll move on to agenda item number 4.
Okay, great. So agenda item number 4 is going to be recommendations for future agenda items. So we've had extensive discussion in the past, in past meetings, about future agenda items. However, things are always kind of quickly and ever changing in the cannabis industry. So this item provides us a great time to give members an opportunity to bring up any additional items you would like to have considered for future agendas. Any items, Member Brown?
Yeah, I'd be curious about receiving a presentation from DCC on the potential for adjusting the fee schedule for cultivation to be reflected by a price per square foot. And instead of having these larger tiers, to also be more flexible into smaller square foot fee schedules, essentially. And I kind of alluded to it earlier. If the initial review of an application is the most burdensome and time consuming, and down the line, we're to a point of mostly all renewals and CEQA approved renewals. Is there room to adjust some of the fees to lower them if it's not costing as much to implement the licenses, but also is there opportunity to go to an actual price per square foot and not have the tiered ranges? That'd be one.
Yeah, I would strongly support that too. And I do think that a per square foot per harvest is makes a lot more sense. I mean, one of the things that we've heard repeatedly from cultivators is, especially existing cultivators, oftentimes can't meet that maximum square footage because they're kind of stuck within their existing cultivation size in a lot of instances. So if you have 7,000 square feet of cultivation, you're always going to pay for 10,000 square feet essentially, right? Regardless of whether or not you can ever produce it. And then the reason why I say the per harvest is we had a lot of reports from cultivators that say in the ML1 tier, they can't achieve 3 harvests, right? And then we know farther south, some cultivators are achieving 4 harvests. So creates some inequities, so to speak. And we also heard from mixed light tier 2 cultivators in your area that are only getting 1 to 2 harvests because the higher mountain regions, the colder it is, more heating, those both are expensive, right? But the higher intensity lighting is necessary to maybe just get 2 harvests in, depending on the climate conditions. So I would be very interested in having that conversation as well.
Yeah, I think another advantage to the consideration is sometimes it makes sense to maximize your cultivation footprint and to grow as much as you can. But it's also farming, and so things come into play. Life happens, and maybe you don't have capacity to plant out your full garden. Maybe year one labor, someone broke their leg, and you have to quickly make a dramatic change and scale back. I think supporting the scalability is beneficial. And when you don't have that, it pushes everybody to maximize and kind of overextend. And that problem can trickle through the supply chain, I think. So, yeah, it would be great to have that conversation.
Yeah, there's also disease recovery, right? Sometimes that soil needs to be mitigated with beneficials, perhaps, to ensure that a harvest can occur in the future without having a lot of disease issues that are going to make for a a poor harvest, which makes it not economical to move forward with the full area. There's a number of reasons. So, yeah, I would appreciate that conversation as well.
But that's all I got.
I don't think I have anything to add. Thank you for bringing that up. So I think we could go ahead and move to public comment on this item.
All right, we are now taking public comment on agenda item number 4. The topic for this public comment period is displayed on the slide, so please keep comments at this time limited to this agenda item. If you want to make a comment, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon next to your name if you've logged into the meeting, or by pressing *3 if you've called into the meeting. For our in-person commentators, please raise your hand and our audience moderator will work with you. All commenters have 2 minutes to speak with a 30-second warning. And at that, we will move on to our first speaker, Kathleen Lippett. I have just sent you a request to unmute.
Thank you for letting me speak, and thank you for the conversation this morning. I'd like to make a recommendation that all products, either non-manufactured or manufactured, indicate THC potency for purposes of product consistency, consumer information, to appreciate potential psychoactive properties. So perhaps this feature could be included on the appellation labels. Thank you.
Thank you. E. Walker 323 just sent you a request to unmute.
I'm going to say something similar to what the previous speaker said. I would also like to recommend that you consider THC potency labels. Consumers should know what they're buying, just as a consumer knows what the alcohol content is when they buy a bottle of wine. It seems fair that they should know the level of the intoxicating ingredients in cannabis products. So it's just that the more we know, the better off we are. So I would ask you to add that as a future agenda item, potency labeling. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly McCormick, I've just sent you a request to unmute.
And I'd like to add my comment to what the other 2 speakers have said. I think it's very important to have potency labeling on all of the products that are released, and on the products from the farms themselves before they even go to manufacture. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Katz just sent you a request to unmute.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak. This is Michael Katz, Executive Director for the Mendocino Cannabis Alliance. I imagine there might not be answers to these questions that are coming in, but just for the folks who are calling in to know that
Michael, you dropped off.
Is required for the products that are released in the licensed cannabis market. Thank you.
Thank you. Zach Mathau, I've just sent you a request to unmute. Go ahead, Zach.
Hi there, my name is Zach Matthew, and I own a small cannabis farm in southern Humboldt County. And I want to thank everyone for their time and for the topic of this conversation today. And the little sticker you guys are talking about, for a short period of time in 2018, CDFA issued a county of origin sticker. It's a small rectangular sticker with a serial number, county of origin, a small little bear, and tamper evident, and had a QR code on it. And so they could probably show you guys examples of those. And for future agenda items, I believe it'd be beneficial for small family-owned businesses if cultivators under an acre of size were able to self-distribute their own products in addition to just their simple cultivation license. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, at this time, there are no other commenters. Last call for comments on agenda item number 4, which is recommendations for future agenda items. Just a moment. Judy Strang, I just sent you a request to unmute.
Hello, I'd like to make the suggestion for a future agenda item. If we could have more information regarding enforcement to date, I think it would give us all a lot more confidence in the work of the Cultivation Committee going forward as we talk about appellations and labeling. If we knew that in the past that the DCC could indicate that there was capacity within the agency to follow up, I think we're sort of undermining our work if we can't show capacity for what we're suggesting we want. So perhaps as an agenda item, some data regarding enforcement would be time well spent.
Thank you. Any other comments on agenda item number 4? Chair Nevedal, it looks like there are no other comments. Should we close comment?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay. Well, now that we've closed agenda item number 4, I think we can move on to agenda item number 5, which is adjourning today's subcommittee meeting. So thank you everyone for attending, and thank you staff for helping make this possible.
It's nice to be back in person.
Yeah, sure is.